Thank you, David, for the detailed introduction. Esteemed guests, ladies and gentlemen, good evening. The important archaeological discovery of the Mesolithic men in Malta, announced last April, pushed our prehistory back to about 8,500 years before present. The excavations at the Latnija Mesolithic site confirmed that the deer, fox, pig, wood mouse, and probably tortoises were still extinct when these hunter-gatherers arrived in Malta. But the question of what existed on the Maltese islands before the arrival of men still persists. This presentation, based on the book we are launching today, will focus on answering this question. Through the analysis of previously published excavation records, we will investigate the various animal assemblages which inhabited our island's protohistory, from the earliest known, dating back to the early Middle Pleistocene, about 400,000 years ago, perhaps even older. We will commence our journey at our focal point, Għar Dalam. Situated on the southeast coast of Malta, near the town of Birżebbuġa, Għar Dalam is a 144-meter-long, phreatic, water-worn cave, eroded within the Mara member of the Lower Coralline Limestone Formation. It is certainly the most famous and currently the most important paleontological site in the Maltese Islands. Its importance lies in the extensive stratigraphy and associated fossil remains, which were recorded from this cave. Għar Dalam has been known to men at least since Neolithic times, and the first phase of the Maltese Neolithic was named after the cave, the Għar Dalam phase. It is difficult to determine if the Mesolithic was ever represented at Għar Dalam, considering that most of the sediments within this cave have already been excavated. There were no radiocarbon dating methods when most of Għar Dalam was excavated. Nonetheless, all the terrestrial fauna recorded so far from Latnija, associated with Mesolithic men, has already been recorded from Għar Dalam, and my thesis research of 2015. Even the marine gastropod Forcus turbinatus, found so plentiful at Latnija, has been recorded by Joseph Baldacchino in his excavation of 1937-1938, as occurring commonly in the upper stratigraphy of Għar Dalam, which specimens even showed signs of fire. Although Għar Dalam has been instrumental in formulating the newly proposed faunal assemblages, all sites mentioned in published literature have been duly analyzed, and 81 sites in Malta and Gozo have been identified. Listed here are some of the main contributors and their discoveries. We shall investigate briefly these 10 most important sites and the animal assemblages they contained. Pictured here are the main excavators at Għar Dalam, starting from Arturo Essel, who was the first to excavate at Għar Dalam in 1865, and published his report a year later in 1866. Above each name are the dates when each respective excavation took place. The present biochronological interpretation of the Maltese Quaternary faunal assemblages through time is only possible thanks to these previous researchers, and many more who are not depicted here, who left us details of their published research. Methodology. The stratigraphy of each known site, including Għar Dalam, was extracted from published excavation reports. As with other sites, Għar Dalam stratigraphy was analyzed in great detail, and each respective layer given a particular reference. Example, Għar Dalam, Baldacchino 1937-38 Bed A, which includes the name of the site, followed by the excavator's name, year of excavation, and bed reference. Great care was taken to discern between layers where human disturbance was recorded against those layers where none was noted. Layers where human-related artifacts are mentioned were analyzed separately. Taphonomy, preservation, and condition of fossilized remains were also given particular importance in order to establish whether fossils were deposited in situ, autochthonous, or derived alloctonous. Before proceeding with describing the Maltese Quaternary faunal assemblages, I will clarify some of the terminology used and explain the distinction between faunal complex, local faunal assemblage, and stage. Faunal complexes are nominated as being nearest to an influx of animals from outside the Maltese Islands. The designated type localities representing these faunal complex held within them a wide variety of species recorded in stratigraphical association. Local faunal assemblages are more localized assemblages associated primarily with a particular site or a limited number of sites. Some designated local faunal assemblages contain only one species, or contain a limited assemblage of species which are not necessarily representative of a whole faunal complex. Assemblages which chronologically occur between postulated influxes of species are designated under stages. This is the newly proposed revised strategy of Għar Dalam. We will go briefly through each respective layer as we analyze the different faunal assemblages which occurred through time. The recognized new stratigraphy at Għar Dalam seems constant throughout the cave, except in the lower layers, where the upper clay layer and the pebble small boulder layer occur, as indicated on the slide. A bottom-up stratigraphy was adopted in my work. A brief explanation regarding the Quaternary, which is the most recent of geological periods synonymous with the Ice Ages. The Quaternary is divided into two epochs: the Pleistocene, which commenced 2.58 million years ago, and the Holocene, which started 11,700 years ago. The Quaternary was not one single unremitting period of great cold, but was punctuated by periods of warmer interglacials. During the glacial periods, a lowering in sea levels was experienced, while during interglacials, sea levels rose again. The last ice age is referred to as the last glacial maximum, and during this ice age, sea levels are known to have been about 120 to 130 meters lower than today. It is during such periods of regression that animals may have crossed over from mainland Europe to Sicily and from Sicily to Malta, although a continuous land bridge does not seem a likely possibility. Sicilian faunas are always richer in species when compared with those of Malta, and certain species have not been recorded here. We will observe this throughout each assemblage. There was probably a yet unidentified barrier which prohibited certain species from reaching our islands. Most of the species recorded here are good swimmers. Island hopping would have been a more plausible scenario. Not only Maltese sites were analyzed, but also those from Sicily, since it is generally accepted that there were multiple exchanges of species between both islands during the Pleistocene. We shall compare the faunal assemblages from each respective Sicilian faunal complex with those from Malta. The oldest faunal complex in Sicily, the Monte Pellegrino faunal complex, has not been recorded from the Maltese Islands. This faunal complex is thought to date back to the late Pliocene or early Pleistocene. Għar Dalam does not hold a complete sequence of sediments spanning the whole Maltese Quaternary. These are the first four designated faunal assemblages from Malta, The first three are not represented at Għar Dalam. Each respective faunal assemblage will be analyzed accordingly. An important characteristic common to all these four faunal assemblages is the presence of giant dormice. This is an artistic impression of the mnajdra with il-ħesri benajsa faunal complex. This is the oldest proposed faunal assemblage recognized to date from Malta. It is an imbalanced, poorly diversified assemblage exhibiting high endemism and lacking large terrestrial predators. I will explain what is shown in the painting. To the right-hand side are a male tusked and female dwarf elephant of falconer, scientifically known as Paleoloxodon falconeri, which stood at around 90 centimeters shoulder height. To the right, emerging from the reeds, is the larger dwarf elephant species from Mnajdra, P. mnajdriensis, which stood at around 1.9 meters shoulder height. Another third species from Malta, P. melitensis, is currently considered as the same species as P. falconeri, as designated by Ambrosetti in 1968. This is due to sexual dimorphism, with males being larger than females. At the center of the painting is the extinct giant swan of falconer, Cineus olor falconeri, which had a wingspan of about 3 meters. Behind this swan is the extinct giant tortoise Solitudo robusta. To the left center of the picture is a pair of extinct Maltese crane, Grus melitensis, flipping an unfortunate frog frozen in an eternal stance between life and death. At the forefront, proceeding from left to right, is a frog, possibly the Mediterranean painted frog, Discoglossus pictus. Next is an undetermined species of lizard, the European pond turtle, Emys orbicularis, the European common-toed bufo, and another pond turtle. In the middle far right, standing on a dead tree, is the giant dormouse Latia melitensis, which grew to the size of a rabbit or cat. The oldest assemblage from Malta shows similarities with the Spinagallo faunal complex from Sicily. The upper three pictures depict mammal species found in Malta, common also to Spinagallo. In Malta, we have 2 species of elephants, 3 species of giant dormice, undetermined bat species, and possibly the only recorded small carnivore, the common weasel Mustela nivalis, which was recorded from Whittle-Hessley Cave by Adams in 1866. One important particular characteristic which emerges when comparing this earliest assemblage from Malta with the assemblage from Spinagallo and Sicily is that in Malta, the smallest form of elephant, P. falconeri, is almost always found associated with the larger form of dwarf elephant, P. mnajdriensis. This association is found in almost all sites throughout Malta, where P. falconeri and P. melitensis are recorded. In Sicily, P. falconeri is in most cases not recorded with P. mnajdriensis, although some records exist of a larger-sized elephant stratigraphically preceding P. falconeri. In the Spinagallo faunal complex are also recorded a species of shrew and otter, both of which are recorded from a subsequent assemblage in Malta. Pictured here are the species of reptiles recorded from Malta, common also to Spinagallo and Sicily. Reptiles in Malta are dominated by the giant tortoise Solitudo robusta, as well as freshwater turtles. We do not have much detail regarding the lizard, frog, and toad species, which have not been identified in published literature. Listed and depicted here are reptile species found at Spinagallo, but not in Malta. These include the tree frog, the European green lizard, the tooth-expanded lizard, the whip, and grass snakes. The tooth-expanded lizard is recorded from Malta, but from a later assemblage. These are some of the bird species recorded from the Mnajdra with il-Ħesri Benajsa faunal complex. Most of them are endemic to Malta and Sicily. In Sicily, the number of bird species recorded from Spinagallo is much larger, with about 65 species identified. No new dating analysis has been undertaken in this research. The suggested dates are derived by comparison with similar assemblages from Sicily. The Spinagallo faunal complex from Sicily, containing remains of P. falconeri, has been dated to the early Middle Pleistocene. Work by Belwomini and Bada in 1985 obtained an age of 550,000 years for P. falconeri. A later work in 1991 obtained an age of 455,000 plus or minus 90,000 years for both P. falconeri and P. mnajdriensis, which date was in 2010 revised by Heritage to 370,000 plus or minus 74,000 years. The chronological attribution of these two assemblages is tentative. Tal-ġnien could pertain to the Mnajdra with il-Ħesri Benajsa faunal complex, as both otter and shrew are recorded from Spinagallo and Sicily, but the smallest dwarf elephant, P. falconeri, is absent from Tal-ġnien. At Mala, the presence of hippopotamus precludes the site from being attributed to the oldest Maltese assemblage. Hippopotamus is also absent from Spinagallo and Sicily as well. Tal-Mala is probably interim between the oldest Maltese faunal complex and the Bone Breccia faunal complex where hippopotamus is very common. From Tal-ġnien we have new records of shrew and otter, while from Mala we have hippopotamus, all of which are associated with giant dormice. The Middle Cave site is unique to Malta, and a similar assemblage has not been found in Sicily. When describing the stratigraphy of this cave, Adams, in 1870, mentions the stratigraphic occurrence of a vole species predating remains of giant dormouse. Vole species are normally recorded from much younger assemblages in both Malta and Sicily. From his comments, Adams seems to have been sure that the remains he found at the Middle Cave pertained to a vole species, and mentions that they were closely allied, if not identical, to the bank vole Arvicola pratensis. Fossil remains from the Middle Cave include vole, giant dormouse, birds, frog, bones of fish, as well as land snails. The chronological position of this assemblage is tentative, and has been positioned as part of the older group due to the presence of giant dormice. In order that we have a complete picture of our Dalam stratigraphy, we will commence with the oldest and lowermost layer, referred to in my publication as the lower clay layer. No bone remains were found in this layer, only plant impressions and fragments of mollusks. The lower clay probably formed when our Dalam was still a phreated tube and accumulated at the bottom of the cave as a result of dissolution processes. Now we proceed towards in our Dalam stratigraphy, and above the lower clay is the Bone Breccia layer. 3 type localities have been designated for this second proposed faunal complex from Malta, with Inċita, Tal-Ħerba Fisher 2 and Għar Dalam. This assemblage, coinciding with or near to a new influx of species from outside the Maltese islands, is more balanced and varied, with new species being recorded, including deer, ox, bear, new species of giant dormouse, and a lizard species. The Bone Breccia is mostly referred to as the hippopotamus layer, which is misleading, since remains of other animals have been recorded. Hatton Thompson's nomenclature is once again adopted and named the Bone Breccia layer. The second faunal complex from Malta shows similarities with the Maccagnone faunal complex from Sicily. This is a scientific artistic rendering of the Within-cheetah tal-Herba 2 and Għar Dalam A faunal complex, depicting most of the recorded species associated with the second influx of species into our islands. At the center of the painting is depicted a male dwarf elephant, P. nigeriensis, with a female and a juvenile to the right. The smallest of dwarf elephants, P. falconeri, is already presumably extinct. Next to the juvenile elephant, rearing up, is the brown bear Ursus arctos. In front of him nigeriensis is the hippopotamus, Hippopotamus pentlandi or Hippopotamus melitensis. Both are mentioned from the bone breccia, and the giant swan Genius olor falconeri, guarding her nest, with the giant tortoise Solitudo robusta at its back. To the front, far left, is an extinct species of lizard, next to a giant dormouse, Latia or Maltamis, and the small, extinct Sicilian shrew, Crocidura sicula eswe. To the top right of the giant dormouse is a species of red deer. Top and to the left of painting is the European greenfinch and a roosting Myotis bet, a flying barn swallow Hirundo rustica, and a flying horseshoe bat Rhinolophus. At the center of the painting is depicted a hippo carcass carried by the torrent of water and entering Għar Dalam. Due to my general interest in Maltese fossils, I decided to include an element of tertiary in the painting, and near the base of the giant dormouse tail is a fossil shark's tooth pertaining to the species Otodus angustidens, eroding from the Miocene limestone. This painting was commissioned in 2024. The scene is set opposite Għar Dalam and shows with Dalam in full flood. I will comment on this scenario later on in this presentation. This slide lists and depicts mammal species recorded mostly from Għar Dalam, all of which are common also to the Maccanione faunal complex in Sicily. New arrivals include deer, ox, bear, and giant dormouse. Listed and depicted on this slide are mammal species recorded from Maccanione in Sicily but not in Malta. These include the straight-tusked elephant, otter, wolf, wild pig, Sicilian deer, water vole, hedgehog, hyena, cave lion, and steppe bison. This characteristic of Sicily's assemblages being richer in number of species when compared to Malta is reflected in all our assemblages, and probably points to some unknown barrier which prohibited certain species from arriving into our islands. This slide lists reptiles and birds associated with this faunal complex. No reptiles seem to have been recorded from the bone breccia of Għar Dalam. We have one species of extinct large-sized lizard from Within-cheetah and a giant tortoise species from tal-Herba 2, both of which have been recorded from Maccanione in Sicily. To the right are reptile species recorded from Sicily, but not from this assemblage in Malta. These include the Mediterranean painted frog, the grass snake, the European pond turtle, and Hermann's tortoise. A large number of bird species, in excess of 70, have been recorded from Sicily, against 11 species recorded from Malta. These are some results of dating analysis performed on fossils from Sicily by Belwomini and Bada in 1985 and by Bada in 1991, obtaining an age of 180,000 years and about 200,000 plus or minus 40,000 years, respectively, for P. nigeriensis, hippopotamus, and deer. From the bone breccia layer of Għar Dalam, we have an unpublished datum performed on a hippomolar from the bone breccia, which obtained an age of about 115,000 plus or minus 10,000 years, which is equivalent to the late Middle Pleistocene. In the inner reaches of the cave, above the bone breccia layer, is the upper clay layer, At its base is the hippopotamus-only local faunal assemblage, and as its name suggests, only hippo remains are recorded. Għar Dalam is not the only site where hippopotamus-only remains have been found. Hippo-only sites are recorded from Birkirkara, Zebbuġ, Burmarrat, Hamrun, and Timrieħel. Overlying the hippopotamus-only layer, the following species have been recorded from within the upper clay layer. These include elephant, deer, hippopotamus, bear, wolf, and tortoise. Newly recorded species include the wolf, the fallow deer, and tortoise testudo graeca. Of note is the presence of wolf. The bone breccia is the last layer where giant dormice were recorded, and their disappearance at Għar Dalam coincides with the presence of the wolf. No micromammals have been recorded. The pebbled small border layer is found above the bone breccia in the outer reaches of the cave, where the upper clay is missing. Only an impoverished assemblage was recorded from this layer, consistent of elephant, hippo, and deer. Also, no micromammals have been recorded. We shall now proceed upwards in Għar Dalam's stratigraphy and analyze the red earth layers. 3 assemblages have been recognized from bottom to top. These are the Għar Dalam deer-only local faunal assemblage, the Microtus terricola militensis faunal complex, and the early post-Proboscidean stage. The deer-only local faunal assemblage is recorded at the base of the red earth layers, and as the name suggests, only deer fossils were recovered. We now come to the third faunal complex from Malta, and a new influx of species from outside our islands. This is an artistic scientific rendition of the Microtus terricola militensis faunal complex, commissioned in 2013. On the right-hand side under the trees and on the far bank is the elephant species still identified as being nydriensis. From left to right at forefront is the extinct Maltese vole Microtus terricola militensis, the European green toad Buphotes viridis, the extinct Sicilian shrew Crocidura sicola esve, the European red fox Vulpes vulpes, the common pochard Aitia ferina, and the European pond turtle Emys orbicularis. At the center of the painting, from left to right, is Schreiber's bat, Miniopterus schreibersi, the European brown bear, Ursus arctos, an extinct species of bat from Għar Dalam, Rhinolophus meheli birzebbugensis, the possibly occurring Hippopotamus pentlanti, the European song thrush Turdus philomenus, and the deer species Cervus elephos. All of these species have been recorded from Għar Dalam. The Microtus terricola militensis Għar Dalam faunal complex probably constitutes the last influx of biota into the Maltese Islands, and may correspond with the onset of the last glacial maximum and the lowering in sea levels. This assemblage shows similarities with the San Teodoro faunal complex of Sicily. Compared with the other older assemblages, we note an increase in the number of species, with new arrivals including the pig, the horse, fox, 2 new species of voles, and the wood mouse. The mention in excavation records of some species which are already reduced in size, such as a small-sized horse, a small-sized fox, and the endemic species of voles, may indicate that the assemblage at Għar Dalam has already been isolated for some time. All species listed here are common to Malta and San Teodoro and Sicily. Listed here are the mammal species which have been recorded from San Teodoro but not from Malta. These include the cave lion, the steppe bison, the European hedgehog, and Savi spine vole. The only reptiles recorded from Għar Dalam associated with the waterfowl include frog, toad, and the European pond turtle. From San Teodoro Faunal Complex in Sicily, we have the European green toad, tree frog, and other unidentified frog species, tortoise, small-sized lizard, geckos, and other undetermined reptiles. We have about 7 species of birds recorded from Malta, against circa 14 from San Teodoro. The cave of San Teodoro has recently featured in the news due to the discovery of Mesolithic men dating back to 16,500 years before present. We do not have any dating for any of these species included in this assemblage. By correlating the Maltese assemblage with that of San Teodoro and Sicily, we may attribute an approximate age to the late Pleistocene. A dating by thorium-uranium obtained from a speleothem at San Teodoro cave obtained an age of about 32,000 plus or minus 4,000 years. Another unpublished datum by Chris Standish, which features in a PhD thesis by Leila Souza of 2018, is based on speleothem analysis from the upper red earth layers of Għar Dalam and obtained a widely varying age of approximately between 80,000 and 20,000 years. Proceeding upwards in the stratigraphy of Għar Dalam, we arrive at the upper part of the red earth layers. The post-Proboscidean stage is found below and within the intermittent stalagmitic floor. This assemblage from Malta exhibits similarities with that of the Castello faunal complex in Sicily. Here we note the presence of fewer species, and the largest of the mega herbivores, the elephant, seems to have become extinct. It is unclear if the hippopotamus existed during the preceding Microtus terricola militensis faunal complex. Likewise, no elephant or hippopotamus species have been recorded from Castello in Sicily. Species recorded from Malta include deer, wild horse, wild ass, fox, vole, shrew, frog, toad, and possibly wolf, bear, and tortoise. In this slide are species which are found at Castello faunal complex of Sicily, but not in Malta. These include Savi's pine vole, the marten, the least weasel, lynx, wild cat, wild pig, the European hedgehog, auroch, roe deer, wood mouse, crested porcupine, and the Corsican hare. Dated to the late Pleistocene and the last glacial maximum, when sea levels were at their lowermost, to minus 120–130 meters, we observe the most pronounced difference where assemblages between Sicily and Malta are compared. Would this discount the presence of a continuous land bridge between both islands? No dating is available for Castello assemblages. Age proposed is that of the late Pleistocene. We now leave the red earth layers of Għar Dalam and venture into the uppermost stratigraphy of this cave under the realm of men. An intermittent upper pebble bed, made up of water-worn pebbles and angular fragmented rocks, possibly man-made, is sometimes recorded overlying the upper stalagmitic floor. The uppermost layer, the superficial boulder layer, composed of rounded boulders, stones, and clay, is not represented in the surviving stratigraphical columns at Għar Dalam. These rounded boulders could have originated from rubble walls, previously constructed within the cave. The two faunal assemblages associated with men will be briefly discussed. These are the faunal assemblages which are associated with men. The Apodemus sylvaticus stage, the wood mouse, spans from the Mesolithic till the Bronze Age, while the Rattus stage, the black rat, spans from Punic to modern times. From what has been recorded in the recent find at Latnia, only Apodemus has been recorded so far, and no Rattus. This may indicate that Rattus may have been introduced at a younger stage, perhaps during the Neolithic. Species from Għar Dalam associated with the presence of primitive men in our islands, denoted by the presence of pottery sherds, human remains and implements, are recorded from above the upper stalagmitic sheet and within the upper pebble bed. Other species are also recorded from within natural geological features, such as caves and fissures, and man-made prehistoric sites, such as prehistoric temples and tombs. Domesticated species include pig, goat, sheep, ox, horse, donkey, rabbit, dog, and cat. It is difficult to discern with certain species, such as pig, horse, donkey, and rabbit, were domesticated or wild stock. The record of some pig remains from Latnia may indicate that wild pigs were probably still extant when men first arrived in Malta. Wild species include deer, wood mouse, black rat, shrew, bats, hedgehog, toad, frog, tortoise, and wild birds. Included in the species are deer and wood mouse apodemus, both recorded from Latnia as contemporaneous with Mesolithic men. This last assemblage spans from Punic till present times. Listed here are species which have been recorded from Għar Dalam, and two other sites at Mosta and the Burmes Baldakinos site. Domesticated animal species include pig, goat, sheep, ox, cow, horse, donkey, rabbit, dog, and cat. Wild species include deer, fox, possibly rabbit, black and brown rat, the house mouse, bats, the northern African hedgehog, shrews, tortoise, the ocellated skink, and the Mediterranean painted frog. Of note are records of deer, sometimes referred to as of large size, and sometimes of small size. Also, small-sized horse and small-sized fox, associated with remains of goat and sheep, and pottery sherds dating to the Punic period. Could this mean that fox and deer survived until relatively recent times? Newly recorded species include the brown rat, the house mouse, the North African hedgehog, the Etruscan shrew, the ocellated skink. These species have been introduced by man. We shall also take a quick look at a new theory which explains how sediments ended up infilling Għar Dalam. The theory withheld at present states that a river flowing over the cave eventually eroded through its roof and deposited its sediments of mud and bone within the cave. But this scenario would account for only one layer, the bone breccia. There are also several flaws with this reasoning. First and foremost, a body of water would take a very long time to erode through the cave's floor and eventually reach below the cave's entrance. There is approximately 60 meters of lower coralline to erode, which is the approximate width between Għar Dalam's mouth and the opposite bank. Would any bone material deposited within the cave survive so long, with a river flowing upon the bone remains? Secondly, the bone breccia has been reported as being mostly hardened by calcific infiltration, which would not be possible with a running body of water. Thirdly, there seems to be no sign of sorting of material within the breccia. This new theory, included in this publication we are launching today, is in accordance with the presence of a phreatic tube, which lay across the valley at Għar Dalam. The first slide shows Għar Dalam as a phreatic tube, with the lower clay layer accumulated at the bottom. The tube lies below the water table, and the rocks are fully saturated with water. The second stage shows that a long period has elapsed, and the water body running through Għar Dalam has eroded through the tube's floor, creating two separate caves. A second small cave opposite Għar Dalam was discovered by Joseph Baldacchino at around 1937. When explored, it was found full of clay, probably similar to the lower clay layer at Għar Dalam. We also notice at Għar Dalam that the bedrock of lower Quaternary shows undercutting, which suggests that a spring may have flowed over the lower clay for some considerable period of time, thus creating what is called a keyhole passage. This slide shows Għar Dalam in full flood, probably due to flash flooding, the result of extraordinary precipitation. The stormwater level enters Għar Dalam and deposits mud and bone, which had been carried by the torrent of water. A bone deposit near to Għar Dalam may also have become liquefied, with the mud and bone being pushed inside the cave by the running torrent of water. This would account for the large amount of bone material which forms the bone breccia, the oldest and bottom fossiliferous layer at Għar Dalam. Once normal conditions reassert themselves, the water level within Għar Dalam would drop below the cave's entrance, down to normal levels. This would leave the freshly deposited accumulation of bones and mud beyond the reach of running water. A considerable period of time had elapsed before an additional layer was deposited on the bone breccia, allowing the bone and mud deposit to harden into breccia due to calcific impregnation by percolating water. This calcification would not be possible if running water was flowing over the deposit. Other instances of copious rainfall and flash flooding would have repeated the process, with water entering the cave once more, depositing fresh material and bones, and then receding back below the cave's entrance to normal levels. This new theory would explain how all the layers at Għar Dalam may have entered the cave. Some of the material in the uppermost layers may have probably been introduced by human agency. Another interesting piece of information included in the book concerns a missing painting which depicted Għar Dalam. Two paintings by Robert Caruana Dingley are said to have been commissioned in 1924 to be exhibited in the Malta Pavilion at the British Empire Exhibition of 1924 in Wembley. These two paintings are still in existence and are exhibited at the museum at Għar Dalam. Nonetheless, the existence of an additional painting depicting Għar Dalam was revealed within correspondence by Caruana Dingley and a certain Vincenzo Bonello Floriana, dating to 1924, which information is included in a publication by Giovanni Bonello of 2016. The artist Caruana Dingley states explicitly that he was working on a painting depicting the valley of Għar Dalam, having already finished two other paintings, one showing a composite of animal fauna at Għar Dalam and another of Għar Dalam cave itself. This lost painting is partially depicted in a postcard, which was sold at the Malta Pavilion, although it is unfortunately partially hidden by an obelix-like column. We end this presentation with a worrying problem. The graph depicts the number of sites discovered and reported in the Maltese Islands from 1840 till present date. From 1840 till 1900, 32 sites were recorded. From 1901 till 1950, 33 sites were recorded, while from 1951 till present day, only a meager 16 sites have been reported. At a time when Malta is rife with development, there is no doubt that our Quaternary deposits are being destroyed, gone unreported and unfortunately ignored. This is a great loss, as each individual fossiliferous deposit could be unique, and losing such important sites means losing them forever. This publication strives to emphasize this said situation and appeals to the concerned authorities to start investing due importance in such important sites, at par with archaeological sites, of which several are reported each year. I would like to thank several people who made possible this book. A special thanks goes to the Chairman and Board of Directors and Management of Heritage Malta. Also, a heartfelt thanks to the publishing team of Heritage Malta, in particular Godwin Vella, Pierre Balzia, Maria Muscat, and Kimberly Azzopardi, for their hands-on contribution to this book. Without their help, this book wouldn't be here today. I would also like to thank the Marketing and Communications Heritage Malta team and the staff of the National Museum of Natural History who made possible this book launch. I would also like to show my appreciation to John Borch, ex-Senior Curator of Natural History and Għar Dalam A, for his assistance with photography and making available material at the Natural History Museum. Special thanks also go to the Board of Mastery Scholarship Scheme for awarding a scholarship to the present author way back in 2013. A heartfelt thanks, full of appreciation, goes to the University of Malta, ex-Dean Professor Alex Torpiano and Dr. Adrian Mifsud, under whose auspices and guidance this work has been prepared while reading for my master degree. Thanks and appreciation goes to my main tutor, Professor Marco Sherin, from the University of Perugia, under whose guidance this work has been prepared. To Professor Antonella Cinzia Marram and Dr. Daira Petruso from the Universities of Messina and Palermo, who were the reviewers at my Viva. Thanks to several researchers who contributed copies of their work. Last but not least, to my dear wife Anna Maria for her unfailing support and understanding during my long-standing interest in Maltese fossils, which lasted throughout my life. Today happens to be our wedding anniversary. Thank you. I thank you all for your attendance and attention, and hope that your question about what animals inhabited Malta prior to the arrival of men has been somewhat answered, and urge you to purchase a copy of my book. Thank you.